dreams come true.
Now we've got a fascinating video, man. This video titles was Pele the most overrated player ever. It's a very interesting title, Was Pele the most overrated player ever? I mean, there are questions over Pele's career, definitely. Especially the fact that he never played in Europe. That's probably like the biggest point or the biggest question mark over his career, man. He never played in Europe, because as you know, Europe is like the benchmark of football, or like the best players play in Europe. But at the same time, let me just put this straight. Back in Pele's era, apparently Brazil had the strongest league. The best players played in Brazil during Pele's time. So that technically makes this point invalid, the fact that he never played in Europe. But, even though the best players, or that the best Brazilian players played in Brazil, I still feel like the best defenders played in Europe, especially in Italy. Because as you know, throughout history, man, Italy have had the best defenders, man. The Italian league, the Serie A, man, they've always had the best defenders. So that's the point. He never really tested himself against the best defenders, or like tested himself in a different environment, because playing in Brazil, that's his comfort zone. He knows the league, he knows the people. How about trying a different challenge, in Europe, that can give people, a bit of an idea of how good you are adapting in different environments, different cultures, different type of people. That's one thing, I like about Cristiano Ronaldo. Cristiano Ronaldo tested himself in different leagues, man. Even though it was just in Europe, but at least he was in different leagues. He played in the Premier League, he played in Italy, played in Spain, and he succeeded in all of them. And even even more recently in Saudi Arabia, he's been successful in all of those leagues. So he's valid. He's like, he's proven, because he's done it in so many different leagues. Like people like MESSI and Pele, that only played in one team, or like just one country. I know obviously like Messi moved quite recently, or like most of his career was in Spain. Same for Pele. Most of his career was in Brazil. So that's one thing I have to say about Pele, is the fact that, even though the Brazilian league was very strong, they probably had the best attacking players back in the day. But like, I still feel like, you need to test yourself in a different place, in a different environment, But there's so many factors, man. There's so many factors. To say it's overrated, I feel like maybe it's a bit too much. I don't think he was overrated. I just think, maybe maybe there's some question marks, but I don't think it's overrated, man. Let's keep it real. But yeah, make sure to smash this like button, sub to the Patreon, guys. Let's get in there.
My YouTube channel, one of the very first videos to start getting a lot of views was the one where I talked about why Pele is the most overrated player ever. Sure, maybe I wanted to clickbait a little to help grow my channel, and it might have said some outlandish things, but for the most part, it's undeniable just how misunderstood Pele's career was. Trust me, I get he's an idol to many, and one of the greatest ever whose impact to the game of football is unmatched, so I understand how the video title might anger some, but to see just how many people refute the facts and still claim his career is free of criticism blows my mind. So today we're gonna change.
That's one thing you can't say, that his career is free of criticism. He definitely wasn't perfect. Definitely wasn't perfect. A lot of his goals that he scored apparently were in friendly games. I know, yes, he did. Let's talk about this throughout the video.
Change the clickbait title and discuss once and for all why Pele, despite being the greatest of his generation and arguably even the entire history of football, still has, more than any other footballer, the most misunderstood and controversial career of all time. But regardless of that, what's definitely not controversial and is a widely known fact is that there is no better dungeon battle RPG than today's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends.
Okay, let's go.
First off, I want to start by saying I'm in no way trying to mock or disrespect Pele. It's not the goal of this video and definitely not reflecting of my opinion on him. I truly believe Pele is one of the top 5 greatest of all time and unmatched in his era and influence over global football. My goal here is to simply talk about the controversies in his career and many common misconceptions surrounding it, giving both pro and con perspectives on the argument. To start off, the biggest and most well-known is, of course, Pele's goal-scoring record. It was the first thing I mentioned in my older video, and it's probably the most well-known misconception about Pele's career. For years, Pele's PR team and supporters will always stand by the fact that Pele scored 1,283 goals during his career. However,
What?
the fact
1,200 goals. Really? That's crazy, bro. Even if some of them were in friendly games, that's still crazy. To score 1,200 goals, man, that's unheard of. Even Cristiano Ronaldo, I don't think got that many goals. He definitely got less than 1,000. 1,200 goals. Nobody's breaking that record. Nobody's breaking that record.
support that his official record is 760. For years, Pele's PR team and supporters will always stand by the fact that Pele scored 1,283 goals during his career. However, the facts support that his official record is 767 goals and 812 appearances, meaning that almost 40% of his goals were scored in friendlies, exhibitions, and tour games. Now, regardless of that, he still has an insane career goal-scoring ratio of 0.94 goals a game, and I don't think any single person can say that isn't anything shy of legendary. But many people use the fact that for decades, Pele and his team have always denied the official goal number, which has caused many people to dislike him and call him overrated simply because so many casual football fans had believed and still do believe that Pele's record was really 1,283 goals without knowing anything else. But even
even if they were friendly games, 40% of those goals were in friendly games. I mean, but nowadays, even when players score in friendly games, those goals still count. You know, even if they're in friendly games, I mean, it still counts, in my opinion. If it's against like proper teams, I think it counts. It might not, it might not be in competitive games, but like, bro, it's still a goal, man. It's still a goal. Bro, that's ridiculous, man. Regardless if it's friendly, no friendly, but it's still ridiculous to score 1,200 goals over your career.
His official goal tally is still insanely good, but you still see jokes all over social media, especially on Twitter, because people dislike the fact that he's trying to make his official stats better than they actually were. Many people also claim that those unofficial games were mostly against farmers or fans can make is while he did play matches against teams like the Brazilian Coast Guard, who are far from professional players, a lot of those goals in friendlies and unofficial matches were also against top teams in every European league. I mean, the list is just too long to read one by one. But look at how many wins he has in each country and how many goals he scored against each team. If you add it all up, he scored 145 goals in 130 matches across 16 European countries. Wow. An insane 1.12 goals per game ratio. He also had his best performances against Italian teams.
So this is for those people that think, Pele is overrated because he never played in Europe. This is against European teams, man. Even though, yes, it wasn't competitive, but it's still against European teams. It's still very impressive.
With 41 goals in 38 appearances, and in West Germany with 29 goals in 19 appearances. I'll admit, when I made my original video, I didn't really know that, but it's just absolutely incredible. Because many of Pele's critics say he never played officially, they try to take away the fact that Pele absolutely destroyed those teams, regardless if the wins or goals had any weight behind them or not. But you definitely have to give him credit for that. So honestly, I believe a lot of people just use this argument against Pele because he was dishonest about his record for so long. But when you really look at it, how could you blame him? If you played that well across the best clubs in Europe, you would want those goals and matches to count too, right? Even if they weren't exactly official. The next point I made in my video was that the overall competition and level of football that Pele was playing against wasn't really competitive at all. In a way, I kind of still hold on to that opinion. While there were a few legendary defenders in Pele's era, like a keeper who really made a name for himself back then was Lev Yashin, arguably football's greatest goalkeeper. And you don't really hear much about other goalkeepers in that era at all. While there were only a very few good players that stood out, the rest were nothing really special at all, especially between defenders and goalkeepers of that time. I mean, honestly, look at most of these highlights. Do you see much world-class defending? Sure, Pele's insane touch, skill, and dribble would make any defender look foolish, but just look at every other defender he beats. They just stand around and watch while most of them do simple jabs. Pele was way ahead of his time and was without a doubt the greatest talent in the world during his prime. And it made it a lot easier than 90%.
I mean, he's talking about the fact that a lot of these players weren't even professional. Some of them were like part-time footballers, man. But listen, the fundamental fact is he did it well in his era, man. You can't blame him for being around during that period. He did it well in that period. He was the best in his lifetime or in his playing career. So that talking about, oh, these guys were farmers, the defenders were not that good, and the gap between the best players and the average players was far wider than now. I think that's just BS, man. Listen, the guy was just very good, he was just blessed with a lot of talent. Maybe a lot of players back in that era, maybe they weren't as good as compared to now. Like, nowadays, like everyone that's professional, is well trained, tactically aware of like what they're supposed to be doing. They have coaches that train them really well. They have the best facilities to recover. But obviously, like back in the day, the facilities that they had wasn't that good, and the training sessions weren't as professional as now. But the fundamental is he did it best in his era, so you can't blame him for like being that good. Like, come on, what is he supposed to be? Just because the defenders were terrible, that means like he's not an all-time great, or like he's not as good. He was his time period. Doesn't make sense, man.
Of the players trying to take the ball away from him were most likely not the best. If you look at today's game, for example, the talent pool is honestly quite spread out, with your average defender being much better than they were in Pele's time.
It's just a
Those
different
who
time
try to
period,
defend Pele's case would say that there shouldn't be any comparison. They were completely different eras with different training, diets, and philosophies of the game. And trust me, I get that completely. Comparing eras of a sport isn't really the best way to analyze things.
Exactly.
Pele was like the Albert Einstein of his era, and a lot of you guys pointed out other similar analogies to me in my previous video. However, on the other hand, many of you claim and swear that Pele faced incredibly aggressive defense that were out to break his legs. I have to firmly disagree with that completely. If you look at footage of defenders in Pele's era, they in fact make much more legitimate challenges and clean tackles than players do today. Just look at what you're seeing right now. They are in no way trying to break Pele's legs or injure him. They're actually going for the ball and trying to make clean tackles. Do they seem like extremely skilled defenders? Well, some of you might say yes, and others might disagree. But to say that he faced a much more ruthless and aggressive defense is a pure myth. Defenders in Pele's era, I would say, are without a doubt more disciplined than defenders.
Nah, actually, I think defenders back then were less disciplined, man. I've seen so many videos like from the 80s, 70s. These guys were not disciplined at all. They were just flying in, making challenges whatsoever. Because I think back in the day, like the ref would just allow certain plays to go on. Like now, like they're more protected. I feel like back in the day, defenders were way more reckless, bro. These guys were just diving in everywhere. I think I saw Maradona highlights. These guys were so reckless. They were just diving in everywhere. They're trying to literally break his leg, bro. Maradona's leg. So I feel like back in the day, defenders were not as disciplined. They were far more reckless. Maybe a lot more physical than compared to now. And I think definitely the defending back in the day was way worse than now. Definitely, they were more reckless and less disciplined. Nowadays, defenders know how to read the game more. They're more disciplined. Because of the coaching that they've got. They can analyze players before a match. Like back in the day, I don't think they had that technology to watch games beforehand and analyze certain players. So it makes sense why defenders weren't as disciplined, because they weren't as prepared for certain players as compared to now. Now, like I already said, you could watch a video of certain player and know how to defend against that player. Back in the day, they didn't have those facilities or like those technologies, man. So definitely, facts that defenders for me were way more terrible than now. Definitely.
Of today, you rarely see any horror tackles or malicious attempts at taking the ball. I mean, come on. Compare that to defensive plays of today's game, you're definitely much more likely to get injured. I mean, guys like Pepe and Sergio Ramos are infamous for their over-aggressiveness. Some of these tackles I'm showing right now are outright scary, and you would never want your favorite player to come across those types of plays. From what I could gather, defenders back then played more by the book and less risky. Would Pele do well against the best defenders of modern football? Well, I believe he absolutely would. I mean, he played with a heavy leather ball and still had that much control and skill. But I also believe his career would be shorter, or at the very least, receive more injuries, because defenders are just a lot more aggressive and play more dangerously in modern football. Another point I made in my old video was that Pele's...
I'm sorry for pausing the video again, but I disagree. I don't think I don't think defenders were more aggressive now compared to back then. I feel like back then they were way more aggressive than now, bro. Like I already said, I feel like right now defenders are more disciplined. You know, yes, you're still gonna have the odd defender out there that's gonna be reckless, like Sergio Ramos, Pepe, but like in general, I feel like defenders nowadays are way more disciplined and just know how to read the game more. They don't dive into challenges as often as defenders back in the day, man. So I disagree with what he said right here.
International record and achievements are surrounded with a lot of misconceptions. I've seen a lot of people, especially on Instagram and Twitter, mistaken some of his international records. For one, some people believe Pele held the record for the most goals in the World Cup, but that record belongs to fellow Brazilian Ronaldo the Fenomeno. They also think that Pele has the most World Cup matches won, but that record of 16 wins also belongs to another fellow Brazilian, Cafu. In fact, many of you would be surprised to hear that Pele has never won the World Cup Golden Boot. Just look at his performances in the World Cup side by side with the Golden Boot scorer.
Wow, 1958. Okay. 1962, one goal. Only one goal? One goal for 1962, 1966, one goal, 1970, 4 goals. I mean, it's not great, is it? One thing I have to say about Pele's World Cup career or international career is the fact that he was playing with world-class players, man. I'm not trying to take away, the fact that he was very successful, on the international stage for Brazil. But you have to remember, like, he had help. He had lots of help. It's not like he was carrying Brazil on his back. Yes, he was very important for Brazil. He was a vital player for them. But, like, he had world-class players around him. The greatest players during that period were Brazilians, bro. I'm more impressed with I'm more impressed with Maradona's performance for Argentina than Pele, because I think Maradona carried Argentina more than Pele did for Maradona carried Argentina more than the way Pele carried Brazil, if that makes sense, in my opinion. Maradona, bro, this guy was literally like the engine of Argentina. Without him, I don't even think they would have made the quarterfinals, in 1986. Without Maradona in that Argentinian team in 1986, I don't think Argentina would have won that World Cup 100%. But there's always that possibility that Brazil could have won those 3 titles even without maybe. Okay, I'm not gonna put it this way. Okay, to put it this way is Pele was very important for Brazil, but I don't think his impact was that great as compared to like Maradona's one. Let me just leave it as that.
Golden Boot. Just look at his performances in the World Cup side by side with the Golden Boot scorer. However, on the other hand, nobody has more World Cup trophies than Pele himself. He's the youngest to ever score a hat-trick in the World Cup at 17 years old. And even if you think the defense back then was subpar, it's still an insane achievement. I mean, it's not his fault he was too good for his era, because that record has never been close to being beat, and I don't think it ever will be. But another side of the argument is that it was a lot easier for Pele because Brazil had the best players in the world by a long shot. Sure, Pele was definitely the greatest of his era, but his teammates were right behind him as the greatest players in the world, making Brazil basically a super team. And although Pele was the best player in his country, many people seem to have the misconception that Pele was the player of the tournament, winning the Golden Ball. Also, in Pele's second World Cup win in 1962, he was injured and didn't even play any significant minutes in elimination matches, while his teammate Garrincha carried Brazil to a win with some breathtaking performances that won him the Golden Ball and the Golden Boot as the top player and top scorer of the tournament. And on his third and final World Cup win in 1970, it was Jairzinho who scored 7 goals and led Brazil in scoring compared to Pele's 4. Now, in no way am I saying Pele wasn't an integral part of Brazil. I just want to demystify the misconceptions that many people have who claim that Pele single-handedly carried Brazil to 3 World Cup wins.
Exactly. However, you can't say that. That's literally what you said. You can't say Pele carried Brazil. He had help. He had lots of help. Unlike Maradona that had to carry Argentina on his back. Maradona literally had to carry Argentina on his back. That's a fact.
regarding in 1962 when Pele was out for the elimination stages of the World Cup and say he really only won 2 of those tournaments instead of 3. Because, for example, many people, including myself, say that Ronaldo the Fenomeno has 2 World Cups under his name. But during his first win in 1994, he was the youngest player on the squad and didn't even play at all. So when I discredited Pele in my previous video, saying his 1962 World Cup didn't really count, it's not really a fair criticism. Simply out of curiosity, how many of you have ever been told by the previous generation, or by simple rumors you've heard online, that Pele is without a doubt the greatest player of all time, and just take it as a fact without ever questioning it, versus actually watching his highlights, learning about his career, and then forming your own opinion? I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but in my original video, I mentioned that a young 17-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo claimed Pele was the best player ever. But how could he have known that? Pele had already been retired for 8 years by the time CR7 was even born. I'd imagine in 2002 when he made that comment, it wasn't as easy to watch specific highlights or documentaries about Pele like we can today.
Exactly, that's the power of the media, man. The power of the media, you know. I've said this in so many of my videos, man. I'm not going to sit here and say Pele is the greatest of all time when I've never really seen him play live. If you're if you weren't from that era, man, of like Maradona's era, Pele's era, man, you can't confidently say he's the GOAT. You can't confidently say that unless you're from that period. You know, if you're an older head, then I'll definitely understand. I feel like the older heads actually have a better judgment of who the greatest footballer is, because they've lived through Pele's era and Messi's era, so they have a fairer comparison. Unlike people like us that have only been around, around Messi's era. We've never been, we weren't around during Pele's era or Maradona's era, so we can't really sit here and really give a fair judgment. That's one thing I'm gonna admit. I can't really 100%, say, oh, Messi's the greatest. Even though I do say Messi's the greatest, but I'm saying that based off of the players I've seen play. I always say this, like, from what I've seen, I always say this, watch my videos. I always say, from what I have seen, Messi is the greatest. I've never seen Pele play live. I know, obviously, like, he definitely had an impact in the sports, in football, but I can't sit and confidently say Pele is the greatest footballer of all time. I've never seen a guy play live. That's the only way you can know if this guy is the greatest, right? You need to watch him play live. Simple as that. So for you older heads that are trying to convince me that Pele is the greatest, I mean, I would listen, but like I can't sit there and say he's the greatest. I'm not gonna go off of what you're telling me. I need to see the guy play live. Simple as that.
For 8 years by the time CR7 was even born. I'd imagine in 2002 when he made that comment, it wasn't as easy to watch specific highlights or documentaries about Pele like we can today. My guess is that Pele was just that great, that almost everyone said he was the best player of all time. That is how legendary and above the rest Pele was. Whether you agree or not, it's undeniable that he was so great that his name is known by generations who have never even seen him play. And just for that, you have to give your respect. Pele, probably more than anyone else, has made football the global game that it is today. Even during those friendlies and exhibitions he went on throughout the world that many people criticize him for, he was spreading the love of the game to younger generations or people who had never really cared about football, showing them the beauty of the sport and inspiring them to play or be a fan. Pele's influence throughout the years remains unmatched. You don't have to believe that he was the greatest player of all time or the most skilled player of all time. You might even dislike him and think he's overrated. But if there's one thing you can't deny, Pele is a footballing icon whose name will never, ever be forgotten.
Definitely. One thing you can't take away from Pele is the fact that him and Maradona laid a platform for people like Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, Ronaldinho. These guys are the ones that laid a platform for, these modern players to go on and become legends, bro. They started it off. So that's one thing I can give to Pele, is that, they are very, very influential in football. And also, he must have been good. He must have been good during his playing career. There's no smoke without fire. So if everyone is talking about him being one of the greatest, he must have been good. But I'm not going to go off of what everyone is telling me. I'm going to go off of what I've seen with my own 2 eyes. From what I've seen, Messi is the best I've seen, bro. Simple as that. Pele may have been better, but I can't sit and say that because I didn't see the guy, man. I didn't see the guy. You know, but that was Pele. You know, was he overrated? I can't say. That's my answer, man. I can't say. You know, but yeah, if you like the reaction, smash his like button. Let me know in the comments, man. If you have any points that you want to let everyone know about, or anything, any information about Pele that you want to share, let me know in the comments, please. Really, really appreciate the support. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. That's it.